My name is Monica Green. I am 39 years old this year. 3 days ago, while I was lying in bed, my entire body burning with a fever so high I no longer had the strength to sit up, my husband looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You sick dog, I've already filed for divorce. Tomorrow, get out of my house." He thought I was poor. He thought I was nothing, and he was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Before I tell you, step by step, exactly how I made him regret every single word that came out of that foul mouth of his, let me ask you this. Which state are you watching this story from? Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can continue bringing you cold, calculated revenge stories, where the people who look down on others are always the ones who pay the highest price. Trust me. You won't want to miss a single second of what comes next. And if you've ever been looked down on, just because you stayed silent, if you've ever been treated as if your worth didn't exist, stay. This story is for you. I was lying on the king-size bed Evan always bragged about buying with his own salary. A 40-degree Celsius fever was scorching my entire body. My head throbbed as if someone were repeatedly smashing a hammer into my temples. My throat burned. Every time I swallowed, it felt like swallowing shards of broken glass. Every breath I forced myself to take sent a sharp pain slicing through my chest. I was shaking so violently that the bed sheets were soaked through with sweat. 2 days. 2 days I had been like this. 2 days in hell. That morning, I had asked my husband, Evan Green, to buy me fever-reducing medicine and antibiotics. A request so simple it was almost pathetic. Just stop by a pharmacy and buy medicine for your seriously ill wife. But now it was well past midnight, and Evan still hadn't come home. The house was terrifyingly silent. The only sound was the pendulum clock in the living room. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. As if it were counting down the last seconds of my patience. I reached out for the glass of water on the nightstand. My hand shook so badly I couldn't keep a grip on it. The glass slipped from my fingers, hit the carpet, and shattered. Water spilled everywhere, and all I could do was lie there, helpless, staring at the ceiling, wondering where my husband was. Evan had changed. God, he had changed so much. It all started about a year ago when he was promoted to department head at his company. Suddenly, Evan became too good for everyone. Too good, even for me. He started coming home late. Some nights, 3 in the morning. Sometimes 4. When I asked where he had been, he screamed in my face, blamed me for everything. The house wasn't clean enough. Dinner wasn't good enough. And I wasn't good enough. 3 months ago, I started getting sick more often, a cough that wouldn't go away, constant exhaustion. Instead of worrying or caring, Evan started calling me the sick one. Can you believe that? His wife was ill, and he chose to mock her, to belittle her. He seemed to have forgotten everything, forgot that I was the woman who stood by him when we had nothing. When we lived in a cramped, roach-infested apartment in Brooklyn, barely surviving day to day. When he lost his job and spent 6 months stretched out on the couch, depressed, bitter at the world. I was there. I held him. I encouraged him. I believed in him. Even when he no longer believed in himself. But all of that no longer mattered. I heard a familiar sound, the luxury sedan pulling into the driveway. Finally, a weak sense of relief washed over me. He was home. Maybe he had brought the medicine. I tried to sit up, pressing my aching back against the headboard. I waited for him to open the door, waited for him to bring me what I needed. The front door slammed shut. Not closed, slammed. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, angry. Those were not the footsteps of a man worried about his seriously ill wife. They were the footsteps of a man who was furious. Furious about what? I had no idea. The bedroom door flew open. Evan stood there, 1.88 meters tall, designer shirt, perfectly styled hair, handsome as always. But his eyes, they were pure hatred, cold, venomous, and in his hand there was no pharmacy bag, no medicine. Just a thick brown leather briefcase. "Evan," I whispered. My voice was so hoarse I barely recognized it myself. "Where's my medicine? I have a really high fever. My head feels like it's about to explode." He laughed. Actually laughed. It was the most horrible sound I had ever heard him as. "Medicine I'm getting," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I brought something much better than medicine. This is a cure for both of us. A treatment for my life." He stepped forward and threw the briefcase onto the bed. It landed right on my legs. "What is this?" I asked, my mind foggy from the fever. "Open it," he said coldly, "unless you want to die of curiosity." With trembling fingers, I picked up the briefcase. It took me a long time to manage to open it. Papers slid out. On the very top, in bold letters, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Everything stopped. My heart. My breathing. And time itself. "Divorce," I whispered. "Why are you so surprised?" Evan sneered. He sat on the edge of the bed, far from me, as if I disgusted him. "Listen here, you poor, sick dog. Do you really think I want to spend the rest of my life taking care of a useless burden like you?" He stood up and began pacing the room, as if giving a speech. "I've taken care of everything already. The papers are filed. You won't get a single cent. All the assets are in my name. This house, this car, everything belongs to me." I said nothing. I just looked at him. And behind that gaze, something was quietly taking root. Something Evan couldn't see and would never understand. "When this is all over," he said, his face glowing with excitement, "I'll be marrying my fiancée, Paige. She's younger, healthier, and most importantly, she understands my position." Paige. So there was another woman. Of course there was. "Tomorrow morning," Evan said cruelly, "I don't want to see your face in this house anymore." Then he walked out. I stayed behind, seriously ill, divorced, and thrown out of my home, all in one night. I cried. I cried for 15 minutes, and then I stopped, not because I was weak, not because I accepted it. I stopped because something cold and calculating was rising inside me. I reached under the spare pillow and pulled out the secret phone. Only one contact appeared, Dr. Allison Wright. I pressed call. "Activate the contingency plan," I said. The game had officially begun. I opened my eyes as the medical vehicle rolled into the VVIP area of Cascade Medical Center. "Doctor," I called. My voice was still weak, but my gaze was sharp as steel. "Yes, Ms. Green." Dr. Wright leaned in closer. "Evan took the house and the cars," I said. "He said everything was his. Everything was in his name." Dr. Wright gave a faint smile, one that was knowing, meaningful. "He forgot, ma'am," she said. "He forgot who paid off his business debt at First National Bank a year ago, right before his assets were about to be seized. He forgot," I continued, feeling my strength return little by little, "that the collateral for that loan was the house and the luxury cars he brags about every day. And he certainly doesn't know," Dr. Wright added, "that the investment company that bought his entire debt from the bank is Green Legacy Group." There was a moment of silence. The doctor and nurse inside the vehicle professionally pretended not to hear our conversation. "Doctor." "Right," I said, my voice cold and clear. "Initiate the asset repossession procedure. When would you like to begin, ma'am?" I looked out at the streetlights sliding past the window. The city looked so peaceful, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "He kicked me out tonight," I said. "He'll think I'll be homeless by tomorrow morning. I want to let him enjoy his victory with that girl, Paige. Give him 3 days. 3 days to enjoy it." Dr. Wright nodded. 3 days. Consider it the last free rent period." "Exactly," I said. "On the 3rd day, we take back everything that rightfully belongs to me." "Good," Dr. Wright said firmly. "On the 3rd day, our legal team will move. He won't know what hit him." "Perfect," I whispered. "Now cure me. I need to be healthy and strong enough to watch his face shatter into a million pieces." The vehicle stopped at a private entrance. A team of specialists was already waiting. I was transferred to a presidential treatment suite, more luxurious than any five-star hotel. And far away, on the other side of the city, Evan was sleeping soundly in Paige's arms, dreaming about his beautiful new life. He didn't know. He had no idea that his real life would end in exactly 3 days. Victory tasted too sweet for Evan, too intoxicating. He woke the next morning in Paige's upscale loft. Morning sunlight poured through tall windows, bathing the entire room in gold. Paige was still asleep beside him, holding his arm tightly. He looked at her beautiful face and smiled, too satisfied, too smug. He had done it. He had gotten rid of the burden in his life. That sick dog, Monica. He imagined that right now I was crying at some bus station somewhere, trying to scrape together enough money to go back to my poor parents' house. The thought made him chuckle. "Good morning, honey," Paige's husky voice said. She opened her eyes lazily. "What time is it? Has that thing gotten out of our house yet?" "Of course," Evan replied confidently. "I told her to leave before dawn. She had no other choice. She has no money, no power. She's just a weak woman who's lived off me her whole life." Paige smiled. "Great. I'm excited to move in. This loft is luxurious, but that house is a palace, and I'll be the queen." "Of course, my love," Evan said. "Anything for you." "Come on, get ready," Paige said, sliding out of bed. "We're having breakfast at our new house today. I'll tell the maid to throw away anything Monica left behind. I don't want a single trace of her to exist." An hour later, Evan's sleek sports car glided smoothly into the driveway of the massive house in Bellevue. He stepped out wearing sunglasses, striding as if he owned the world. Paige walked beside him, clinging to his arm, looking proud. Evan unlocked the front door. "Welcome to our palace, my queen," he said dramatically. They walked inside, and something was strange. The house was extremely quiet, but also very clean. Too clean, actually. Evan had expected me to leave some kind of mess, throw things around, maybe break a few things out of anger, but there was nothing. Not a single item out of place. He walked into the bedroom and opened the door. His heart beat a little faster. The room was impeccably tidy. The bed where I'd been sick just yesterday was now made with spotless white sheets. There was no trace of medicine bottles, no broken glass. Even the carpet where I'd spilled water looked completely clean and dry. "She must have cleaned up," Evan muttered, confused. "I'm glad she behaved properly," Paige said behind him. "At least she was useful one last time." But Evan felt unsettled. Something wasn't right. How could I, burning with a high fever, have cleaned this room so perfectly? And where were all the dirty bed sheets? He checked the closet. My modest clothes, my long dresses, my headscarves were all gone. The drawers of the vanity were empty too. "She really left," Evan said, finally feeling relieved. He brushed the strange feeling aside. Maybe I'd called a taxi and managed to pack a small suitcase before I left. Better this way. A clean break. "Of course it's clean," Paige squealed excitedly. "Now measure this room. I want to replace this bed. It's too old-fashioned. I want a round bed with a canopy." Paige ran through the house, her sharp voice echoing as she pointed at everything. "That sofa is ugly. Replace it. That painting is so tacky. Throw it out. This kitchen needs a full remodel. I want an imported Italian kitchen set." Evan only smiled and nodded. "Yes, my love. I'll change everything. Anything for you." "We're going to celebrate tonight," Evan declared. "I'll invite our closest friends. Order the finest catering service in the city." He picked up his phone and called the high-end catering company he always used. He ordered everything: imported Wagyu beef, fresh seafood platters, premium European wine, all of it. "Understood, Mr. Green," the catering staff member said over the phone. "Your total is $2,400. Per our procedure, we require a 50% deposit right now. Of course, Evan said arrogantly. Send me the invoice. I'll pay with my primary credit card. He sat down on the sofa Paige claimed to hate and opened his banking app. He attempted to pay the $1,200 deposit. He entered his credit card number confidently and hit pay. The phone processed for a moment, then a red notification flashed across the screen. Transaction declined. Evan frowned. Strange. The limit on this card still had hundreds of thousands available. Must be a signal issue. Probably just a network issue, he muttered. He tried again. Transaction declined. Cold sweat started forming at his temples. This couldn't be happening. He was a VIP client. Why were all his cards being declined? He tried a different credit card from the same bank. Declined. He tried his debit card. Declined. Insufficient funds. Evan's eyes widened. Insufficient funds? Impossible. His paycheck had been deposited 3 days ago. He quickly exited the payment screen and opened his main mobile banking app. His heart was pounding now. He entered his password. The screen loaded and then a message appeared. Access blocked. Please contact your nearest branch. Evan's entire body went stiff. Panic began spreading through his chest like fire. This was a disaster. He couldn't access his payroll account. He couldn't use any of his credit cards. Evan, the caterer just called me, Paige shouted, her voice sharp. They said the payment is still being declined. How embarrassing. Evan was panicking. Then he suddenly remembered he had an emergency account at another bank, one he rarely used. The balance wasn't much, but there should still be a few thousand in it. With trembling hands, he tried to pay the catering deposit using that account. Success. Evan let out a deep breath. For a moment, he could save face. See? He called to Paige with a strained smile. Just a network issue. It's handled. The party will be here at 7 tonight. Paige was cheerful again, but after she left, Evan's smile vanished immediately. His face went pale. Something was extremely, extremely wrong. Why was his main account locked? Why were all his credit cards being declined? He tried to think rationally. Did this have anything to do with me? With Monica? No. Impossible. That stupid woman couldn't do something like this. She was nobody. She had nothing. He promised himself that first thing tomorrow morning, he would call the bank and give them hell. He would demand compensation for this humiliation. Later that afternoon, while he paced the house trying to smother his anxiety, the doorbell rang. Evan opened the door. A delivery worker in uniform stood there holding a large brown envelope. Mr. Evan Green? Yes, that's me. Certified mail, please sign here. Evan signed the receipt, closed the door, and examined the envelope. The sender was a law firm with an expensive-sounding name, Blackstone and Associates. He assumed it was court approval paperwork related to his divorce filing. He opened it, expecting routine documents. But what was inside made his blood run cold. It wasn't from family court. It was a notarized demand letter, a legal warning. His eyes scanned the harsh, formal lines. Dear Mr. Carter, on behalf of our client, Green Legacy Holdings, we hereby notify you that you are in breach of contract regarding your business line of credit. The principal loan amount of $5 million is now due and payable immediately. We grant you a 3-day extension to settle the full debt. Failure to comply will result in the immediate enforcement and seizure of your assets, specifically a residential property located at 847 Maple Ridge Drive, Bellevue, and a luxury vehicle registered under number. The glass in Evan's hand slipped and shattered on the marble floor. Sweat poured down his forehead. 3 days. $5 million. Foreclosure. No, that's not possible, he whispered, his entire body shaking. I paid the installment last week. What breach? And what the hell is Green Legacy Holdings? His celebration victory suddenly became the beginning of a nightmare. That night, with music playing, friends laughing, and Paige showing off, Evan could only force a fake smile. His mind was complete chaos. He felt an invisible trap slowly closing around his neck, tightening, tighter and tighter, and he had no idea that trap had been set long ago by me, the woman he threw away like trash. In the presidential suite at Cascade Medical Center, I was lying in a high-end hospital bed, but I was no longer weak. The fever had broken. Color had returned to my skin. My strength was coming back. Dr. Wright sat beside the bed, holding a tablet. "Ma'am," she said, "the surveillance team reports that Mr. Green received the legal warning letter at 3 p.m. His reaction is exactly as we predicted. Shock, panic, but he still hasn't grasped the full situation." I smiled, a cold smile. "Good, let him think. Let him stay up all night wondering what's happening. Tomorrow he'll run to the bank." "And we've prepared the script for that meeting," Dr. Wright said. "Perfect," I said. "Everything is unfolding according to plan." I looked out the window. The lights of Seattle glittered in the night like fallen stars scattered across the earth. "Evan," I whispered, "you taught me an important lesson, that in this life only real power is respected, and now you're going to learn your own lesson." Dr. Wright stood up. "You should rest, Ms. Green. Tomorrow will be a long day. And the day after will be a day he will never forget." I nodded and closed my eyes, but not to sleep, to imagine Evan's face when his entire world collapsed. And in Bellevue, in the house he believed was his, Evan lay wide awake beside Paige, who slept soundly. He stared at the ceiling, his heart pounding like a drum. 3 days, $5 million. Those words repeated in his head like a cursed hymn, and he didn't know that the countdown had begun. Counting down to the day he would lose everything. Evan didn't sleep a single second that night, not 1 second. Beside him, Paige Holloway slept peacefully, exhausted after the little party they called a celebration. But in Evan's mind, the words in that warning letter kept spiraling like a storm with no end. 3 days, $5 million. Foreclosure. Green Legacy Holdings. The moment dawn broke, Evan jolted out of bed like he'd been electrocuted. His body ached from a night of tension. His eyes were bloodshot and dry, burning. He didn't even shower. He just splashed cold water on his face, grabbed whatever clothes were on the floor, and rushed out. At exactly 8 a.m., the moment the bank opened, Evan sped to the branch he proudly called the VIP Clients Bank. He stormed in, ignored the line of waiting customers, and went straight to the VIP service desk. "I'm Evan Green," he said loudly, slamming his VIP card onto the counter. "I want to see the branch manager right now." The employee flinched for a moment, then immediately changed her tone. Evan was escorted into a private lounge. 5 minutes later, a relationship manager walked in. Sharp suit, perfect posture. But it wasn't the branch manager. "Good morning, Mr. Green. How may I help you today?" "Don't waste my time." Evan cut in rudely. "Explain to me why all my credit cards are locked, why my payroll account is frozen, and why I received a ridiculous breach of contract warning letter last night." The manager calmly looked at his computer screen. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Green. Let me check." He typed a few lines. Silence for a few seconds. Then he said, as if noticing something odd, Interesting." "Interesting what?" Evan roared, slamming his fist on the table. The manager looked up, his voice still steady like a machine. "We are not the ones who locked your account and credit cards, sir. Simply because your current balance is essentially zero and your credit limits have been fully maxed out." "Impossible." Evan shot to his feet. "My salary was deposited thousands of dollars just a few days ago, and my credit limit is in the hundreds of thousands. I haven't used anything." "Yes, sir," the manager said, still coolly professional. "But the system recorded an emergency automatic withdrawal on your business line of credit, executed at exactly 12 o'clock last night. That withdrawal drained your payroll account, and simultaneously used up the remaining limit on all your credit cards. Evan's face turned ashen. His lips moved as if he couldn't believe it. An emergency automatic withdrawal. Ordered by who? The manager glanced back at the screen. Not ordered by us, sir. It was ordered by the new owner of your line of credit. New owner? Evan's voice cracked. According to our records, the manager continued, your $5 million business loan at our bank was sold 6 months ago to a private equity company called Green Legacy Holdings. Our bank is now only the servicing party, collecting the monthly installments on their behalf. It felt as if someone had squeezed Evan's throat. Green Legacy Holdings. That name, again. Why would they do that? Evan whispered, his voice dry and broken. I've never missed a single payment. The manager shook his head. That is outside our authority, sir. According to the notice we received last night from GLH Holdings, you have been declared in breach of contract under the loan sale agreement. When a breach occurs, GLH Holdings has the right to forcibly pull funds from your accounts as an initial late penalty withdrawal. And it appears, they exercise that right. Evan gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. How did I breach anything? We don't have the details, sir, the manager replied, as emotionless as if he were talking about the weather. They certainly explained it in the notarized demand letter you received. You'll need to contact GLH Holdings directly or their attorneys. Evan stood up and walked out of the bank, feeling as though he was walking out of a world that had just collapsed. And this was the moment I knew Evan was starting to feel real fear. Because when a man who's used to giving orders, used to being served, used to flashing a VIP card and having the whole world step aside, suddenly realizes he's just a name in a system, shut down by an invisible someone pressing a button. Can you imagine his face then? That familiar arrogance, gone. Only a lost, bewildered stare remained, like a man stranded in a stormy night. And I'm telling you the truth, that was only the beginning. Evan staggered out of the bank like a drunk. The sky seemed to spin above his head. Sweat soaked through his dress shirt, even though the Bellevue morning air was cool. He dropped into his sports car, the car that would be repossessed in just 2 more days, and stared at his hands. They were trembling so badly he could barely hold his phone, Green Legacy Holdings. That name kept pounding inside his skull like a death bell. Evan opened his phone and searched the internet, and what came up made his stomach clench. Green Legacy Holdings was a massive conglomerate, an empire operating in luxury fashion, global skincare, real estate, and international investment. Their logo appeared everywhere. Upscale department stores, fashion magazines, business reports. Evan had seen that logo before. He just had never cared enough to pay attention. Why? He muttered, desperate. Why would a company that big buy my debt? Then he remembered the law firm name printed on the warning letter, Blackstone and Associates. He stared at the phone number on the page as if one call could decide his fate. Then he dialed. Good morning, Blackstone and Associates, a professional voice answered. This is Evan Green, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I received a notarized warning letter on behalf of GLH Holdings last night. This has to be a mistake. I've never defaulted on anything. The voice on the other end stayed calm, and so cold there was nothing to hold on to. There is no mistake, Mr. Green. Our client is acting within the law. You have violated Clause 11, Section B of the loan agreement you signed. Clause 11, Section B? Evan choked. What the hell is that? If you find reading the documents you signed too boring, Mr. Green, the attorney said with contempt barely concealed, then let me remind you. That clause requires you to maintain family harmony and refrain from immoral or dishonorable conduct that could affect the image or integrity of the business loan. Evan went rigid. It felt like all the blood drained from his face. That's a ridiculous clause, he finally managed. What does it have to do with the debt? It has everything to do with it, Mr. Green, the attorney replied smoothly. When your loan was sold to our client, all terms, especially that morality clause, were activated and reinforced. Our client is a company that values family and ethical business practices. Then the attorney's voice dropped, cold and sharp as a blade. Your actions in divorcing and expelling your seriously ill wife, Mrs. Monica Green, to live with another woman constitute a severe and blatant violation of Clause 11, Section B. Evan couldn't breathe. His chest felt crushed. How? He gasped. How do they know? We have irrefutable evidence, the attorney said. Photos, audio, video, and witnesses. We know you threw your wife out 2 nights ago while she had a high fever. That act is what triggered the breach claim. Evan's head spun. His knees turned to water. He had to lean on the car to keep from collapsing. Monica, he whispered. All because of Monica. But how? How does Monica know GLH Holdings? Is she a cleaner there? Did she complain to some sympathetic manager? Nothing fit. Nothing made sense. What do they want? Evan asked, his voice shaking with fear. Give me time. I'll pay in installments. I'll do anything they want. It's too late, the attorney replied coldly. Our client is not interested in installments. Per the notarized warning letter, you have, let me check, 2 days and 7 hours left to pay the full $5 million. If you fail, our enforcement team will seize your house and all vehicles. The attorney's voice remained even, as if reading a polite announcement. Have a good day, Mr. Green. The call ended. Evan hurled the phone at the dashboard. The screen cracked, but didn't fully shatter. Just like him in that moment, split open but not completely destroyed yet. He screamed inside the car, a raw, primal scream, half terror, half rage. $5 million in 2 days. That was impossible. Completely impossible. His salary was frozen. The only assets he still clung to were the house and the car. But those 2 things, it turned out, didn't truly belong to him either. They were being held in the grip of an invisible name, Green Legacy Holdings. Evan forced himself to think through the fog of panic. Monica. This had to be connected to Monica. Somehow. But how? In Evan's mind, I was just a poor, simple housewife, a woman he could throw out of the house with a single sentence. He had to find me, find Monica, beg me to withdraw whatever complaint he believed I'd filed with some female executive, someone he imagined was my church friend. Evan convinced himself there was only one way out. If I'd complained to someone, that person had power, and if that person had power, maybe that person was the CEO of GLH Holdings. He didn't know who the CEO really was. He was just grabbing onto anything he could so he wouldn't drown. Evan started the engine immediately. He assumed I'd run back to my parents' house, people he had always looked down on as poor, living in a bad neighborhood. He was sure I was there, crying, desperate. He would go there, right now. As Evan drove out of the bank parking lot, his phone rang non-stop. Paige Holloway. He ignored it. Paige called again, and again, and again. Finally, irritated to the point of madness, he answered, "What?" Evan snarled. "Where are you, honey?" Paige's voice was sharp as a knife. "Why are you yelling at me like that?" Evan clenched his teeth. In his mind, there was only one word: repossession. "Can you pay with your own money?" he snapped, then hung up rudely. At the salon, Paige stared at her phone in shock. It was the first time Evan had ever yelled at her like that, and the first time Paige began to feel that something was very, very wrong. But Evan no longer had the mind for Paige. He had no mind for anything except finding me. He slammed the gas pedal down. He had to find Monica. He would kneel at my feet if he had to. He would beg. He would do anything. He didn't know, and couldn't possibly know, that the Monica he was looking for was no longer writhing in a bed. I was recovering very well in my presidential suite at Cascade Medical Center, and I was sitting in my executive chair, calm to the point of ice, following every wave of Evan's panic through detailed reports from my legal team. Evan couldn't escape. There was no way out. The trap had closed. The trip to my parents' house ended in complete failure. Their home looked exactly the way Evan remembered. Small, modest, nothing glamorous. The kind of place he used to mock, treating it like a blemish on his life. But this time, when the door opened, what hit Evan wasn't poverty. It was the look. My parents, still in simple clothes, faces carved by years of hard work, stared at Evan with something that made his spine go cold, a mixture of hatred and pity. I wasn't there, and they truly didn't know where I was. "You threw my daughter out of the house when she was sick, didn't you?" My father demanded, his voice trembling with anger he could barely control. "And now you come here looking for her." He stepped closer, eyes sharp as a blade. "Get out. Get out now, and don't you ever dare come near this house again." Evan tried to plead, tried to explain, tried to say there was a misunderstanding, that he just needed to find Monica, that someone was hurting him. But my father didn't listen, didn't want to listen. The door slammed shut right in Evan's face, and just like that, he went back to the city empty-handed, as desperate as a man who'd just been thrown out of his own world. The little money he still had left in his emergency account kept getting eaten away by gas for the round trip, drop by drop, like even his escape route was being drained. That night, Evan and Paige Holloway had a huge fight. Paige wanted to know what the hell was really going on. She wasn't stupid. She could see it clearly. Everything was collapsing. On the edge of total ruin, Evan finally confessed, though in his own way, downplaying, dodging, hoping Paige would swallow it. He said it was just an administrative issue, that his accounts were temporarily frozen, that it was just a bank error, and he could fix it. But Paige didn't believe him. And then she saw the notarized warning letter still sitting right there on the living room table. She picked it up. Read it. 3 days, $5 million. Repossession. Paige's face changed color. "You're bankrupt!" Paige screamed at Evan. "You're completely bankrupt, Evan." "This is only temporary!" Evan screamed back, his voice shattering like glass being crushed in a fist. "I'll fix it!" "It's all Monica's fault. That woman definitely did something. I don't know what she did, but she did something." Paige yanked her arm away, so furious she actually laughed. "Who cares whose fault it is?" she shrieked. "I don't want to live with a poor man." "I didn't sign up for this." That night, they still slept in the same bed, but as far apart as possible, back to back. Cold, hostile. Evan couldn't close his eyes for even a second. In his mind, an invisible clock was counting down. Tomorrow was the 3rd day, the last day. There's a small detail most people don't notice, but it's always the sign of a real collapse. Not when Evan yells, not when he slams the table. But when Paige looks at him, and for the first time in her eyes, Evan is no longer a king. She isn't afraid of him. She starts assessing him. And when a woman like Paige starts assessing, it means she's preparing for something else, leaving. And sure enough, the next morning, everything exploded. The morning of the 3rd day was the most terrifying morning of Evan's entire life. The sun rose, but it felt like the end of the world was coming. 9 a.m. Evan and Paige sat at breakfast in a suffocating, uncomfortable, tense silence. Then the doorbell rang. They both froze. They looked at each other. Faces drained white. "Don't open it," Evan whispered. "Just pretend we're not home." The bell rang again, more persistent. Then pounding hit the door, hard, decisive, full of authority. "Mr. Evan Green," a man's voice called out. "We know you're in there. We are the enforcement team from the law firm Blackstone and Associates. Please open the door." Evan's heart stopped. Paige started crying, this time real tears, terror streaming down her face. "What do we do now, Evan?" she sobbed. "What do we do?" Evan panicked so hard his instincts kicked in. Run! He bolted toward the back door, thinking he could slip out through the backyard, maybe jump the fence. But the moment the kitchen door opened, 2 large security men in black suits were already standing there, arms crossed. "Please remain inside the house, sir," one of them said, voice firm. Evan froze, surrounded, trapped. He turned back toward the living room, legs shaking so badly he could barely walk. The front door was finally opened with the help of a locksmith they had brought. A man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped in, holding a thick folder. Behind him were several court officers, carrying large stickers that read, GLH Holdings, Property Repossessed. "Mr. Evan Green," the lawyer said, voice cold as ice. "Your time is up." Exactly 72 hours have passed. Under court order, we will initiate enforcement proceedings on this property and all assets within it to satisfy your unpaid debt to our client, Green Legacy Holdings. No. Evan collapsed right there in the living room. In a single moment, all his arrogance, all his pride evaporated. Please, give me more time," Evan said, his voice breaking. "I'll pay. I swear, just give me 1 more week." The lawyer shook his head, not a trace of mercy. "You've been given enough time, Mr. Green. Our team will begin immediately. You may take only the personal items you are wearing. You have 15 minutes to leave the property voluntarily." 15 minutes? Paige screamed from behind him. And that was when it happened. The moment Paige understood the full truth. She looked at Evan kneeling on the floor, crying like a child. The man she thought was a king turned out to be a beggar, a hollow fraud. Paige's face hardened. She didn't want to sink with him. Without a word, Paige spun around and ran upstairs. "Paige!" Evan shouted, frantic. "Where are you going? Help me! Please help me!" But she didn't answer. The court officers started moving into the house. They didn't care about the movie unfolding. They slapped bright orange stickers onto everything. The flat-screen TV, the expensive leather sofa, the costly paintings on the wall, all of it. Outside, Evan heard the sound of a tow truck backing into the driveway. They had come for his sports car, the beautiful, expensive car he used to brag about as a symbol of power. 5 minutes later, Paige came back down. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face had been reset completely, determined, cold, sharp. Paige dragged down 2 large suitcases, clearly packed at record speed. She ignored Evan, who was still kneeling there, staring at her like he couldn't believe his eyes. Paige walked straight toward the front door. "Paige," Evan called, his voice shattered. "Are you leaving me?" You're really leaving me?" Paige stopped. She turned back slowly. Her face was filled with contempt, pure, undiluted contempt. "Leaving you?" Paige said, her voice dripping venom. "Of course I'm leaving you. I don't want to live with a pathetic, broke, miserable failure like you." She tilted her head as if watching a joke. "I thought you were a king, Evan. I thought you were successful and powerful, but you're just a clown, a broke clown who lies." Paige pulled out her phone. "I called a taxi. It's already here. Goodbye, Evan. I hope you enjoy your beautiful life on the streets." And then Paige walked out. She dragged her suitcases past the enforcement team, past security, past the court officers, without looking back even once. Evan froze, completely numb. He had been betrayed, abandoned, in the exact way he had done to me. The only difference was, I was thrown away while I was dangerously ill, and Paige left him when he was standing at the peak of absolute ruin. Karma was almost poetic, almost too perfect. "Time's up, Mr. Green," a security man said, then grabbed Evan's arm roughly. Evan was dragged out of his house. No. It was never his house. It was mine. He was thrown onto the hot concrete sidewalk, still in pajamas. He didn't even get the chance to change properly. Evan sat there on the burning sidewalk, watching his precious sports car get hooked to the tow truck, then pulled out of the garage like someone was ripping away a piece of his self. He watched the front door get chained and sealed with official notices. In 3 days, everything was taken from him. Everything. Evan collapsed completely. He lay there, helpless. Pedestrians walked past and stared at him like he was something strange. Some pulled out their phones to take pictures. The man who used to be arrogant was now a public joke, a cautionary tale. He was alone, completely, absolutely alone. No house, no car, no wife, no savings, no credit. Nothing left at all. In extreme panic, in humiliation he couldn't even describe, Evan's brain could cling to only one name: Monica. He rummaged through his pockets like a madman. His phone, screen cracked, was still there. He didn't know who else to call. He didn't have friends anymore. They vanished the moment they heard there was trouble. No one wanted to be associated with GLH Holdings. Evan wanted to curse me and beg me so badly he didn't even know what he wanted anymore. He only knew he had to do something, say something, call for help from someone. With trembling hands, he searched his contacts. Monica, wife. He pressed call. Evan didn't expect me to answer. Maybe my number had changed. Maybe my phone was off. Maybe I had blocked him. But the phone rang once, twice, and on the third ring it connected. Hello? It was my voice, but not the weak, sick voice Evan remembered. My voice was calm, clear, strong. Cold. Evan, who had been about to scream, suddenly felt pitifully small. He started crying, sobbing, uncontrollably. Monica! Evan breathed out, his voice shattering into 1,000 pieces. Monica, help me, please, please, Monica. I don't know what happened. They repossessed our house. They took the cars. They threw me out on the street. Monica, why? Why is this happening? And on the 40th floor of the GLH Holdings building in South Lake Union, Seattle, inside what had once been a VVIP treatment room but was now functioning as a temporary luxury office, I sat upright. I was no longer bedridden. I was no longer sick. I was healthy, energized, and completely in control. I wore an emerald silk scarf, something that made my face look sharp, composed, like someone who had already decided everything. In front of me, Dr. Allison Wright and several department heads were in the middle of an important meeting. We were discussing plans to expand into the Middle East market. My old phone, the one Dr. Wright had taken from the house, buzzed on the conference table. Evan's name flashed on the screen. The meeting instantly paused. Everyone looked at me. I raised my hand, signaling silence, telling everyone to stay exactly where they were. I looked at Dr. Wright and smiled, just a small smile. Then I pressed the speakerphone button so everyone in that room could hear. Evan's sobbing poured through the speakerphone, flooding the conference room like an uncontrolled storm. Monica, help me, please. Monica, I don't know what happened. They repossessed our house. They took the cars. They threw me out on the street. Monica, why is this happening? Why? I didn't answer right away. I let him cry. I let him beg. I let that desperation burn itself out, like a fire that keeps burning until only ash remains. I signaled everyone in the room to maintain absolute silence. The contrast was beautiful. On one side was a luxurious conference room, floor-to-ceiling glass, soft lighting, air that was cold and clean like a place reserved for power. On the other side was Evan's voice, chaotic, trembling, filthy, like a man being crushed by life right there on the sidewalk. When his crying quieted enough that I could hear his breathing, I leaned closer to the microphone. And I spoke, calm, cold, clear, a voice Evan had never heard from me. Not once. Sorry, I said slowly. Who is this? The line went dead silent. Even Evan's hiccuping stopped, as if someone had just squeezed his throat shut. What? Evan stammered, confused, shattered. "It's me, Evan, your husband." "Oh," I replied, my tone still indifferent, as if speaking to a stranger whose name I couldn't be bothered to remember. "Mr. Green, I think there are a few things we need to clarify." I leaned back in my executive chair, eyes fixed on the city beyond the tall glass. "First, you are no longer my husband. My divorce filing was submitted this morning. Second, our house?" I put a gentle emphasis on the words. "3 days ago, you made it very clear that it was your house, not ours, yours." I heard Evan suck in a sharp breath, as if he'd just been slapped hard. "Monica," he whispered, and this time there was something different in his voice. Horror. "Where are you? What did you do? Your voice. You're better now?" "I'm in the middle of an important meeting," I replied, as casually as if he were nothing more than an annoying interruption. I glanced at the table. Dr. Allison Wright and the department heads were still sitting upright, waiting for my signal. "We're discussing our expansion plan into Dubai and Abu Dhabi," I continued lightly. "You know, business, the kind of thing you wouldn't understand." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, the kind of silence that comes from someone trying to piece broken fragments together only to realize the picture makes even less sense. Then Evan suddenly shouted, desperation making him bold like a drowning man grabbing at anything. "Monica, stop talking nonsense. Help me. I know this is you. It's definitely that woman. Allison Wright, the director from your church group, right? You complained to her. You lied about me. Please, Monica, tell her to stop. I'll do anything. I'll come back to you. I'll forget the divorce, I promise." I let out a laugh, cold, short, with no warmth at all. "Come back to me?" I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. "You think I'd pick up the trash I just threw away?" I paused, then continued as if announcing the weather. "And Paige," I said her name with a cruel indifference. "You're late, Evan. She left you about an hour ago, didn't she? The moment the enforcement team walked in. My legal team just reported it. She ran off with her suitcase and didn't look back even once." On the other end, Evan's breathing turned rapid. One sharp inhale like his lungs had been cut. Then he asked, almost voiceless, How do you know that? "Monica, who are you? What are you?" I smiled. A real smile, but not because I was happy, because finally, he was beginning to understand. "You really want to know?" I said slowly. "In all the years living with me, all the years you humiliated me, called me a poor, sick dog, called me a time waster glued to my phone, you never asked even once what I was really doing. You never cared. What do you mean?" Evan's voice trembled with pure fear. I gave Dr. Wright a slight nod. Dr. Wright stood, stepped forward, and took the phone from my hand, her voice professional, cold, every word precise. "Hello, Mr. Green," Dr. Wright said. "You are currently speaking with the executive board of Green Legacy Holdings." Evan nearly choked. "Dr. Wright," he blurted, his voice breaking apart. "Why do you have my wife's phone? What is your relationship with my wife?" I took the phone back. "She isn't my friend, Evan," I said clearly. "Not someone from my church group. She is my CEO. The person who runs my company for me." Silence. A hollow, dead silence, as if all the air had been sucked out of Evan's mind. I stood up and walked toward the glass wall. Below, Seattle moved like normal. Cars, people. Light reflecting off buildings, and somewhere out there, I knew Evan was existing like a shadow. "You asked who I am?" I said, my voice lower, slower. "You called the number of the poor, sick dog you abandoned 3 days ago. But fine, let me introduce myself properly." I stopped for exactly 1 beat, long enough for this entire room and the man on the other end of the line to hold their breath. "Hello, Evan. You're speaking with Monica Green, the sole owner, founder, and chairwoman of Green Legacy Holdings, a company with a net profit of $1.8 million per month. The company that just repossessed all of your assets And the same company you tried to steal from. I heard it clearly. The sound of Evan's phone dropping onto concrete, a dry clack, then silence, a deadly kind of silence. Mr. Green, I said into the phone, still calm. Are you still there? No response. He dropped the phone. Maybe he was frozen in shock, staring into nothingness, while his entire world shattered in a way that could never be repaired. I hung up. I turned back to the conference table. The board members looked at me with clear respect and satisfaction, not for the drama, but for the clean precision of a decision. So, I said evenly, I think that went quite well. Can we continue with the Dubai expansion proposal? And just like that, we went back to work, because that's who I am. A businesswoman, a powerful woman, successful. And Evan was nothing. Just the memory of a mistake I once made. Evan collapsed on that filthy sidewalk, completely crushed. The phone lay beside him. The screen cracked worse. The call had ended, but my voice kept echoing in his head like a hammer striking again and again. Monica Green, the sole owner, founder, and chairwoman of Green Legacy Holdings. No, Evan muttered. No way. But deep inside, somewhere he didn't want to admit, it felt true. And suddenly, everything made sense. The nights I stayed hunched over my phone, the times I stayed in the kitchen for hours, the women's group meetings he used to mock. I had built an empire right under his nose, while he called me useless. I had created a billion-dollar conglomerate. Get up. Evan lifted his head very slowly. That voice wasn't coming from the shattered phone anymore. I said it already, the voice repeated, cold and clear. Get up, Mr. Green. Evan looked up. Dr. Allison Wright stood right in front of him. On either side were two large security men in black suits. They arrived so fast, Evan couldn't even understand how. Chairwoman Green wants to see you, Dr. Wright said. Come to the GLH building lobby. She wants to look at you with her own eyes. She wants to see the face of the man who called her a dog. Evan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You have two choices, Dr. Wright continued, her tone still even. Come voluntarily, or we'll ask these gentlemen to assist. Either way, you're coming. Evan looked at the two security guards. They looked like they were hoping he'd choose to resist. He stood up slowly. His legs almost couldn't hold his body. He was still wearing dirty pajamas. He looked like a homeless man. Follow me, Dr. Wright said, turning on her heel. Evan followed like a condemned man walking to his execution. They crossed a busy street. Car horns blared as Evan stumbled across. Then they stopped in front of a massive blue glass building. At the top were 3 large letters, GLH. The lobby felt like another universe. Marble, glass, perfectly polished gold accents, a man-made waterfall running down one wall, employees dressed impeccably moving back and forth, everyone busy, everyone important. And in the middle of it all, Evan, in filthy pajamas and cheap hotel slippers, looked like a stain on a spotless white cloth. A beautiful receptionist looked at him, disgust clear on her face. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone hostile. "How can I help you?" Evan couldn't form a sentence. "He's here to see Chairwoman Green." Dr. Wright stepped up behind him, decisive. "Chairwoman Green?" The receptionist's eyes widened. "Do you have an appointment?" "She requested him," Dr. Wright said coldly. "Have him wait here." Evan was escorted to the VIP waiting area right in the center of the lobby. "Wait here," Dr. Wright ordered. "Chairwoman Green will come down when she's ready." And Evan stood there, waiting. Every second felt like a century. Employees walked past and stared. Some whispered. Some pulled out their phones. He knew he was being photographed, being recorded. His humiliation was being stamped into permanence. Then suddenly, a soft chime rang through the lobby. The sound came from a private elevator in the distance. Instantly, everything stopped. Employees froze mid-step. The receptionist stood straighter. The front door security turned to face the elevator. They stood at attention. Some bowed their heads slightly. Respect. Almost absolute. The VVIP elevator doors opened. 2 personal bodyguards in black suits stepped out first, taking position on both sides. And then I appeared. Evan drew a loud, ragged breath like someone had held him underwater and finally let him surface. The woman walking toward him was me, Monica, but not the Monica he used to know. This woman was a queen. I wore a high-end sapphire blue power suit tailored to a flawless fit. A silk scarf in the same tone was wrapped around my head in a modern, elegant style. My face, just 3 days ago pale and sickly, was radiant now. My makeup was refined, expensive, sharpening every line of my features. I walked with absolute confidence. My heels clicked against the marble. Soft, but each sound hit like a hammer against what little pride Evan had left. Employees passing by greeted me. "Good afternoon, Chairwoman Green." "Good afternoon, Chairwoman." The greetings rose like a chorus of respect. I only gave a slight nod. I didn't look at anyone. My eyes never left my target, Evan. I walked up slowly, each step crushed what remained of him. I stopped exactly 1 meter away. I looked him up and down, messy hair, dirty face, wrinkled pajamas, hotel slippers. My gaze was cold, analytical, merciless. "Monica," Evan could only whisper, as if the name itself hurt his tongue. "Yes, Evan," I replied, calm and clear, echoing through the lobby that had gone nearly silent. "That's me, the poor sick dog you abandoned 3 days ago." And that was when it happened. That was when Evan completely shattered. All of Evan's power vanished in a single beat. His knees went weak. His body stopped obeying him. And then, right in front of me, right in the middle of GLH's cold marble lobby, Evan crumpled. He dropped to his knees at my feet and broke down sobbing like a child, the sound echoing through the luxurious space until it became something out of place, humiliating, and impossible to hide. "Monica, I'm sorry," he choked out, crying and stammering. "Please, Monica, I was wrong. I was wrong in so many ways. I was blind. I committed a sin against you." His hands shook violently. He reached up, trying to grab the edge of my suit jacket like a drowning man grabbing for a rope. But he couldn't even do that. His hands trembled so hard they caught only air. The entire lobby nearly froze. Employees mid-stride stopped short. People who had been talking fell silent. Every gaze locked onto a scene too dramatic, too unreal. A grown man kneeling and crying at the feet of their chairwoman. My 2 bodyguards stepped forward at once, ready to pull Evan away. But I raised my hand, just one small, light lift of my hand, and they stopped immediately. I wanted Evan to feel this humiliation fully, every second, every breath. "Forgive me, Monica," Evan wailed through tears. "Give the house back to us, please. I'll leave Paige. I'll be your husband again. I'll do anything." I looked down at him. My face held no expression, no pity, no anger. Only an icy emptiness, the cold of someone who has already walked through pain and no longer needs to argue with it. I bent slightly, not to help him up, but to make sure. He heard every word I was about to say. "Stand up." My voice was low, clipped, and carried absolute authority. Evan struggled to his feet with every shred of strength he had left, like a man drained dry. His face was smeared with tears, sweat, and mucus. Pitiful enough that even he probably couldn't stand to look at himself in a mirror. I stared straight into his eyes. "You want to beg?" I asked, deliberately loud enough for the people around us to hear. "That's too bad, Evan." I paused. "My company doesn't hire dogs." I slipped my hand into my designer handbag. Evan looked up, his eyes flashing with a foolish spark of hope, as if he believed I was about to pull out a tissue to wipe his tears, that I would soften. But I only took out a silk handkerchief. And instead of touching his face, I used it to wipe an imaginary speck of dust from the sleeve of my suit jacket, as if I had just touched something filthy and needed to clean myself. My company, I repeated, slow and crystal clear, doesn't hire dogs. I turned, elegant, final. I walked toward the VVIP elevator without looking back even once. "Dr. Wright," I said as I walked, "handle him. Give him one final lesson. Make sure he understands exactly what he threw away." "Understood, chairwoman," Dr. Wright replied, her voice flat. The elevator doors slid shut, and I disappeared from Evan's sight. He stood there, completely broken. Public humiliation, being coldly crushed by the woman he once called trash, hurt 1,000 times more than losing the house, losing the car. 1,000,000 times more. This was it. This was my revenge. And it was perfectly, chillingly done. 2 weeks later. I stood at the window of my 42nd floor office in the GLH building, looking down at Seattle beneath its signature fine drizzle. The sky hung heavy and gray, white office lights reflected on the wet streets, making the entire city look like a cold block of metal breathing. Dr. Wright stepped in, a tablet in her hand. "The final report on Mr. Green, chairwoman," she said. I turned, gave a small nod, signaling her to continue. After leaving the building, he tried to find work, but since we acquired his former company, his HR file has been flagged. No company in the industry is willing to hire him. I nodded. "And?" "He's currently doing manual labor at the Central Market. He makes about $60 to $70 a day, mostly carrying sacks of rice. He rents a corner in a cheap boarding house." I was silent for a beat. Then I asked, still calm, "What about Paige?" Dr. Wright glanced down at the tablet. She tried to latch on to other wealthy men, but rumors about her connection to Mr. Green's scandal spread fast. No one wants to be involved. Right now she's working at a bar in a less safe part of the city. "Understood," I said. "And the divorce?" "Finalized this morning. You are officially single." Mr. Green received nothing. All moral damages compensation was waived in exchange for his written confession. I turned back to the window. "Good. Close this file. I don't want to hear about Evan Green anymore." "Yes, chairwoman." Dr. Wright paused at the door as if weighing something. "If you'll allow me to say so," she began, her voice softening slightly. "Ma'am, you handled this with remarkable restraint. Many people in your position could have destroyed him, even more completely." I turned to look at her. "I don't need to destroy him, Dr. Wright. I only needed to set the boundary and walk away at the right moment. Evan destroyed himself the moment he realized what he'd lost. That lesson goes deeper than anything I could have done to him directly." Dr. Wright smiled. "You are a woman of wisdom, Ms. Green." After she left, I opened my desk drawer and took out a small photo frame. It was a photo of me with my grandmother, many years ago, in her tiny kitchen, where she taught me my first skincare formulas. I gently touched the frame. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered. "I built something from your legacy, and I learned something too. A person's value never comes from what others think of them." I put the photo back in the drawer, closing it softly. Then I looked out at the city again. Somewhere out there, Evan was struggling through his new life, learning how to live with the choices he had made with his own hands. And me? I was here. At the top. Not because I needed to prove anything to him, but because I had never doubted my own worth. Later, some people asked me, "Do you regret it, letting Evan end up like that?" My answer was always the same. I didn't let Evan fall into anything. I simply stepped off the path. He chose for himself. I didn't humiliate him. I set a boundary. I didn't take revenge. I protected what was mine. I didn't destroy him. I only let him face the consequences of his actions. That's the difference. Real power isn't in shouting or violence. It's in silence. In knowing when to walk away, in understanding that not every battle needs you to fight it. Sometimes, all you need to do is step aside and let the other person collapse on their own. Evan thought he had thrown away a worthless woman, but the truth is, he lost a woman who knows exactly what she's worth. And that difference changed everything. My story isn't about sweet revenge. It's a story about finding myself again, after someone tried to make me forget who I was. My name is Monica Green. I am 39 years old. And this is the story of how I learned that the strongest boundaries aren't the boundaries you build. They're the boundaries you know when to step across. Thank you for following Monica's story. If this story touched you, tell me which state you're watching from in the comments. And if you like stories with set a boundary and flip the table, end it clean but painful, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the next video. Every subscription is one way you help this channel keep telling stories that matter. Remember, your value never depends on whether someone else can see it. Know your worth, set strong boundaries, and never let anyone make you feel small. See you in the next story.